Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch One. Thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at a Panerai Radiomir that is more than just a little bit special and features some interesting family connections and a fascinating family tree in history. This is the Panerai Radiomir 1/8 of a second PAM 246 45 millimeters in polished stainless steel. It is a foudroyante Rattrapante sporting chronograph, one of 300 made for the Panerai 2006 Special Series. This is definitely in the nautical tradition that we associate with the Panerai brand, but a different sense of the nautical tradition. Whereas the original Panerai watches were dive instruments for tactical forces pioneering amphibious warfare specialists of the Italian Navy, this is a sportsman's radiomir for adventures above the waves. This is a watch suited to regatta, to match racing. You know, Cuba just opened up. This is the kind of thing I could see on my wrist in a, first to Havana and back race from Key West. It's a romantic image with just a little bit of vintage timepiece style to it, evocative of not so much contemporary America's Cup or carbon fiber wing-masted racing, but vintage yacht racing. I'm talking Briggs Cunningham era, 1950s type stuff. And I think when you start talking about vintage nautical tradition, that is very much in Panerai's wheelhouse. So let's put it on the wrist, get an impression of it, see it in action, but first talk about the fit and the feel. Now the Radiomir is the more traditional of the two Panerai case shapes. Based on the first Panerai combat dive watches of the 30s and the 40s, it's a little bit more nostalgic, a little bit more evocative of the first half of the 20th century. But because it's also a little bit more spare with those wire-style lugs, it suits a smaller wrist like mine well. Now my wrist is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference for those who may be watching these videos for the first time. If you're looking for a sense of scale, my wrist is fairly oval, sort of flat on the top. It's generally the average wrist in profile, a little bit below average in size. Here's an overhead look at it. Here's sort of a profile look to get a sense of its height. You can see that this PAM 246 has a lot of tumble home. From the top of the curved sapphire to the edge of the curved case, there's a curved bezel. So if you want a long sleeve or a dress cuff or a sweater, maybe at sea gear, to ride up and over this, it'll have no problem. This will easily clear any kind of long sleeve, anything but the absolute tightest. You're going to have no problem. Now, as is typically the case with the Panerai Radiomir case form, the lugs are barely there. Little wire loops in the shape of the original wire lugs welded onto Rolex pocket watches to form the first Panerais in the 1930s. Again, there is no lug. Basically, this watch is a cushion case with a nice 1-to-1 aspect ratio that sits planted and firm and quite comfortable against the wrist. When I have this watch on my wrist, I feel like it's beautifully weighted, beautifully distributes its mass. It looks good. The combination of that gorgeous, almost reddish-brown croc strap, I should say alligator, properly speaking, is nicely complementary of a skin tone, and it's got a gorgeous, slightly patinaed contrasting stitch that really fits that sort of ecru dial graphics, the 1/8 of a second, and the Panerai Radiomir marquee at 12 o'clock, as well as the champagne foudroyante subdial at 9 o'clock. There's a lot of coordinated, evocative imagery here, very romantic and very, very complementary, well-suited, well-thought-out, well-paired. Now, let me show you one nice aspect of this watch that could get lost from that overhead wrist shot, and that's this beautiful and uncommon for Panerai trigger-actuated double deployant. Now, most Panerai watches feature a pin buckle style, and it's generally a fairly utilitarian-looking affair. This full double trigger deployant with a very spare, almost echo of the wire lug shape for the buckle itself is a gorgeous and decidedly upscale addition that really burnishes the luxury watch credentials of what I believe to be, at its best, an upscale yachting chronograph. That's really what I feel is the DNA of this watch, and the buckle complements and really bolsters that sense. Outstanding choice by Panerai, but it's something that's easily lost in the focus on the watch itself, so I want to give it a shout out. Now, the nice thing about this watch is that you're not just getting a beautiful watch, you're getting a formidable complication, and one that's ideally suited for yacht racing. Let me start the watch up, and this is the main event. It does get better, but let's talk about the basics. Panerai calls this the caliber OP21. I am 99.99% sure that this is based on the Valjoux-based movement developed by Jacques and Girard-Perregaux for Graham, first featured in Graham watches in 1997 and later featured in the Girard-Perregaux reference 9020 Ferrari foudroyante. I'm confident that's what we're looking at here. It is a 40 joule movement, automatic. It features a 1/8 of a second, that is 4 hertz or 28,800 vibration per hour, foudroyante or lightning second. Now, what you're seeing is the actual beat of the escapement of the watch. The escapement wheel is jumping 8 times per second, and so one circuit of this little crazy hand here, which honestly the iPhone's frame rate might not even be capturing, but one circuit is 1 second. Now you can see there's also a corresponding center seconds hand that is moving around, and that's part of the chronograph, which is 3 register, foudroyante, center seconds, and 30 minutes right here at 3 o'clock. But here's the wrinkle. The coaxial Rattrapante actuation allows you to time and I say coaxial because the pusher is actually located in the knurled onion-style crown here at 3 o'clock. It allows you to time 2 separate events, like racing sailboats, simultaneously and get a split, the difference in time between the 2 competitors. And when you want to start timing that interval again, you just press the coaxial pusher, and that seconds hand jumps back up to the first. In contrasting finish, one is polished metal, and one is the same gloss blue that you see on the flying foudroyante hand. A beautiful complication, beautifully rendered. It's featured on a vintage evocative dial with a dished tachometer scale on the rehaut flange, and then inboard there's a unique calibrated sector minute track. Now the sector or railroad track, which features 2 concentric circles linked by interlinking bars, that's a vintage look for a watch calibration. And it's uncommon to see that and intermediate calibrations making up fractions of a second for the chronograph seconds hand. So that combination of the railroad, the tachometer on the flange, and the calibrations within the sector track, it's quite unique, but at the same time it definitely yells sports to me. It's a look that's vintage, but at the same time very sporty. I like that. I also like the interplay of different colors on the dial. This is an exuberant watch. This is not a stolid, staid, grim combat instrument like the Panerais of yore, and it's better off for it. There's a combination of black, the white printing, but also this ecru or champagne text Radiomir Panerai 1/8 of a second. That complementary champagne color of the metallic foudroyante subdial, as well as polished metal and a sort of key lime natural luminova coloration on what's known as a sausage or thickly painted Panerai dial. Again, I do get a sense that this is a watch that's almost designed with yacht racing in the Florida Keys in mind, and that color just compounds the impression. This Panerai Radiomir 1/8 of a second PAM 246 foudroyante Rattrapante chronograph is available with outstanding original provenance and condition from our website Watch You Want. Check it out in high-resolution images on our website Watch You Want. And if you like the idea of a complicated, sports-oriented, nautically oriented, and nautically evocative vintage-style Panerai chronograph, I have a feeling this PAM 246 may just be the watch you want.